Sir Charles Edward Kingsford Smith was born in Hamilton, Queensland, on the 9th of February 1897. He was the fifth son and seventh child to William Charles Smith and Catherine Mary Nee Kingsford. In 1903, the family moved to Canada for William's work, then moved back to Sydney. In Canada, he was educated at St Andrew's Cathedral Choir School, and in Sydney he went to Sydney Technical High. When he was young, he was more interested in mechanics and machinery than in schoolwork. After 3 years with the cadets, in February 1915 as a senior cadet, Kingsford Smith enlisted to serve in the 1st RAF, which was the main expeditionary force during World War I. He served with the 4th Signal Troop, 2nd Division Signal Company, as a sapper in Gallipoli and as a dispatch rider in Egypt and France. In October 1916, as a sergeant, Charles transferred to the Australian Flying Corps. In March 25, 1917, he was discharged from the RAF and commissioned as a second lieutenant in the RFC. In May he was promoted to flying officer and joined No. 23 Squadron in France. In August he was wounded and shot down. Shortly after he was awarded the Military Cross. After promotion to lieutenant in April 1918, he served as an RFC flying instructor. Kingsford Smith worked with Charles Ulm, performing a number of important demonstration flights. On the first of these, on June 1927, they completed a flight around Australia. This was completed in 10 days and 5 hours, using fuel navigational guides. In a 3-engine Fokker plane, the Southern Cross, Charles, Ulm, and 2 American crewmen, Harry Loyne and Jim Warner, took off from Oakland, California, on May 31, 1928. They flew to Brisbane via Hawaii and Server, a journey that took 83 hours and 38 minutes. They were paid £20,000 each, and Charles was awarded the Air Force Cross and appointed honorary squadron leader for the RAAF. Charles flew the Southern Cross to England to place orders for a fleet of 4 aircraft with which he wanted to set up an air service in Australia. The flight was completed in 12 days and 18 hours, another record-breaking flight. Charles's airline, which was called Australian National Airways, began flights in January 1930. He piloted one of the 2 Arvo 10 planes, called the Southern Cloud, on the route between Sydney and Melbourne. In September 1930, Charles flew solo to England in a new Arvo avian biplane, Southern Cross Minor. He intended to gain publicity with an immediate return flight, but he fell ill and his return trip was cancelled. However, in November, one of his company planes carrying Christmas mail was damaged in Malaya. Charles took off in a new plane to collect the stranded Christmas mail that was bound for England, and returned to Australia with more Christmas mail. In September 1932, Charles travelled by sea to England. In October, he achieved great success by flying, in just over 7 days, solo from London to Windham, Western Australia, in a Percival Gull, Miss Southern Cross. For this achievement, the Commonwealth Government awarded him a prize of £3,000, and he was appointed aviation consultant to the Vacuum Oil Co. Kingsford Smith and Taylor flew Lady Southern Cross to America to find someone to buy it. They returned to Australia after being told that they were finally authorised for a trans-Tasman mail service. On May 1935 they took off in their first flight, which was a complete disaster. About 800 kilometres off any coast, a damaged propeller blade put one engine out. A second engine was burning oil rapidly. Taylor climbed out of the cockpit, took oil from the dead engine, and replaced the oil in the dying engine. After jettisoning most of the cargo, Charles and Taylor made it back to land. On November 6, 1935, Charles and J.T. Pethybridge took off from England to make another record-breaking flight to Australia. The plane and both men disappeared. It is presumed that they crashed into the sea off the coast of Burma. It is thought that Kingsford Smith's fear of water is the reason for the crash, although the wreckage has never been found. Charles Kingsford Smith contributed greatly to Australian society and to aviation in particular. He showed that in aviation anything was possible. By beating records by significant margins, he led others to believe they could do the same. He encouraged adventure and led many people to try things they would have otherwise left alone. Charles opened up the idea of air travel for Australians. He was one of the first to realise the potential and importance of air travel for a nation as large as Australia. This was something that was usually left to Americans and British. He set and broke more records than any other pilot of his day. He helped lay paths for regular commercial flights to and from Australia. Today, Sydney Airport is also known as Kingsford Smith Airport in honour of his service to aviation. Sir Charles Kingsford Smith set standards for all Australian society to live to. He became Australia's most famous male pilot. He is probably most famous for being the first to cross the Pacific from America to Australia. He set standards for pilots to try to beat. He was an inspiration to all Australians.